might have to talk about.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to Pagitt Radio, broadcasting live out of the Twin Cities on November 7th, right?
Ta-da!
November 7th, the day after some big elections in the United States of America. And it's a wee bit of an anniversary. It was 4 years ago today, on the day that is marked by the day after an election, that Doug Pagitt radio started.
Oh, boy.
Did you know that?
No.
Maybe you didn't know that.
I didn't even know you then.
Maybe, really, 4 years ago. And now here you are as the sidekick. See how lives can change? Well, I'm Doug Pagitt. That's Victoria Lynn. Victoria Lynn is a poet, a mother, and a person with particular gastro issues today. Not right now, but in food
Yeah, we're
dilemmas.
glad since we're
The
in
two
an
of us were sitting here just before the
man
show
cave.
started. Lamenting at how we can't eat things we want. I can't eat any meat because my digestion goes crazy. Victoria can't have dairy and other things. But that's all going to change now because Barack Obama is the president of the United States again.
I think my gastrointestinal issues are going to be
And
solved.
And now everything is different because everything stayed the same. It's an interesting. I mean, I'm pleased as punch that Mitt Romney's not the president. I'm pleased as punch that I don't even know what that phrase means.
I know. Where did that come from?
I don't know, but that's right. That's the right phrase, though, right? Pleased as punch.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, punch is pleasing. So why wouldn't it be pleased with itself?
As in, I'm as pleased as if I just had some spiked punch.
Or I'm as pleased as I would feel if I were punch about to, endeavor in being drunk and have
So
my
I'm
life
comparing
goal
myself
fulfilled.
to being the punch.
It is a bad phrase.
Well,
We should eradicate it.
yeah,
We should have a constitutional amendment.
And even
to
better,
get rid of it.
even better, why does anyone ever use it? Hence me. But I am just pleased as can be that Barack Obama is the president of the United States again.
Me too.
Couldn't. I mean, of
Of all our options.
of all the options, other than
It's the
myself,
best one.
I'm thrilled that he's the president of the United States. And other things happened. Not only in the state of Minnesota did the state of Minnesota and a number of other states vote for Barack Obama, but we went, oh no.
Yes.
That was my theme. I was telling people. I don't normally have little phrases for election themes,
That's
but
pretty
this
cute.
one was oh no. Well, I was trying to tell my children, the people who live in my house, how I would like them to vote if they want to
You
continue
make
to
it
receive
sound
my
like you
support.
have 3-year-olds in your house.
Well, so I said vote for Obama,
Yes.
and then vote no
I get it.
on the marriage amendment, and then vote no on the voter ID
And
amendment.
Minnesota is the only state to have defeated such a kind of amendment.
Which amendment is that you're referring to?
the marriage amendment.
Yes, well, okay, that's true. If there was one, but three other states yesterday,
Legalized.
Maine and
Maryland.
Washington and Maryland, all had positive votes that somehow made gay marriage
Legal.
more possible.
Mm-hmm.
One case, I think it was already a state law and it had to be ratified.
Uh-huh.
And in 2 other cases, it was some version of a referendum that will now allow gay marriage to be
Yep.
happening, which I will tell you, I can understand a particular conservative, not even conservative, I can understand a particular worldview for which those votes, Barack Obama as a socialist in their minds, gays and lesbians redefining marriage, which to them is a religious covenant that has been supported by the United States of America, and the marijuana laws in 2 states, Colorado and Washington.
Mm-hmm.
But now, I mean, to these people, I can imagine they are out of their minds. And I don't like to gloat. I'm not a gloater. I think gloating is a form of mocking. And I don't find it appealing, especially when it's in me. Like I hate it when I do that. And I had a severe case of it last night. I mean, I was so
I would have liked to have seen it.
Oh, it was it. My wife and 22-year-old daughter could. I think they can attest to it. It was not. I was not pleased with myself. Somehow I was like diverting the energies of anxiety to gloating, and I knew I was going to gloat. I saw it coming. I didn't want it. I tried to preempt it.
How
But
does one preempt gloating?
well, this is how this one does it. I told myself, as I've tried in every significant election. Not every election has felt significant to me, right? Like some midterm elections doesn't seem like anybody really cared except the candidates, and a couple of party people. I try to remind myself that there are people for whom today is a really bad day, and just a bit of empathy. I mean, people I love, that are crucially important to me, are so sad today, right?
Yeah.
Their hearts are sunken. So I try to say, hey, my enjoyment needs to have space for your sadness.
Yeah. I was feeling that strongly as Mitt Romney walked out on the stage last night alone, and they were talking about how long it took him to concede and all of that, and maybe he didn't have a concession speech, and they were just trying to kill time till he came out. But I was just struck by what a sad day. I thought maybe it took him a long time to come out because he was so sad. Like,
see, and that's where I lost all of my empathy for people, because I was just giddy about the fact that guy had to walk out on that stage. And I have this is why this was my dilemma. I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be empathetic across the system. But here's why I gloated yesterday, and here's why I can't knock the smirk off my face today, is because I haven't met anyone who really truly said, and this is just people that I know, and apparently I only know tens of thousands of people, so I don't know enough. I haven't met anyone who said, I truly, truly wanted Mitt Romney to be the president of the United States. I truly believed in his vision. I feel like he was going to take us somewhere that I wanted. I didn't hear any of that. What I heard from people I love and care about was, I don't want to go where Barack Obama's taking us, anyone but him. And I have a much harder time giving over my own satisfaction of empathy, being empathetic toward people for whom they're just like, I don't want that. I don't like him. Like, I think you're just being spiteful. I get it that people have different political opinions, and they should. We should, in fact, Republicans should become better Republicans. Democrats should be better Democrats. Conservatives ought to become better conservatives. Liberals should be better liberals. Everyone should be better at their position, except the libertarians. Everyone should get better. Everyone should get better at their thing. So fair enough. But that's just part of the mix, right? You win some elections, you lose some elections, you see how it works. The people who understand politics like that, I get it. I just don't know anybody who was really heart sunk over Mitt Romney not being the president. I know people who are really heart sunk because they can't stand that current president.
Or they're worried about the direction, and they thought that Mitt Romney would get them closer. But I did experience personal empathy for
great.
a personal it surprised me.
Good for you.
Well, I just and I also was struck during his concession speech. I thought he was kind of classy.
He was classy.
And
I
appreciated it. I
I did too.
appreciated the stripped down, humble Mitt in a way that I hadn't.
I actually thought the same thing. I thought, if that guy had shown up a couple of times.
I might have not been so worried. I still wouldn't have wanted to vote for him, but I would have felt a little bit better. And it was again striking to me how much I long in politics for more of that kind of stripped down version of what people really think, what they are really feeling. And sometimes it's in our worst moments that we can't help but let that person through. I think we'd all be better off if we could see that side of each other.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. That I felt the same way about that. Now, I was gloating.
It's okay.
And only because I have this thing about Mitt Romney ran for president. All he ever did was the only election he's ever won was being
went over this
was being the governor, right?
Right.
He's lost a lot. He had a concession speech ready to go. The guy hasn't been a political success story. He's been a financial beneficiary. I have a hard time even calling it success. But the whole wealthy guy plutocrat thing, for that to have to say we didn't win, I just couldn't have been more happy. And that's where I feel like now, see, I'm just the guy who just didn't want that guy. So I didn't like that. This is what I didn't like about
that plank in your own eye.
It is absolutely the plank in my own eye. So I understand that, but I don't think anyone should have had sympathy for me or empathy for me because I just think that Romney's the wrong guy.
Well, and the audiences were striking, not just because of their
and
energy,
here's the
but
other.
who was in the audience.
Okay.
Was so.
And the stagecraft, really? Okay, let's say for a minute. Let me just be snarky for a second. Let's say for a minute that the Romney campaign really did believe they were going to win that election. Let's pretend for a minute that they weren't just absolutely BSing for the last 2 months, that they really thought the polls were wrong. They didn't think parenthetically, they didn't think the polls were wrong. They knew they weren't going to win that election. And they went out there and they bashed the president and they lied about anyway. Okay, so let's say they really did believe it though, right? Let's pretend for a minute they did. Was that scene that you saw last night? Was that how you would introduce a new president to the world? The backdrop with just a screen back there that couldn't have looked more like the episode from Big Love, if you've seen Big Love, watch Big Love sometime, where a Mormon candidate becomes part of the state legislature and does his acceptance speech.
And it's the same.
It's, oh my goodness. I mean,
I thought it was trying to look stately. Yeah. That's what I thought they were trying to do, trying to go for a very kind of stately look, but it just looked generic.
It looked generic, and it was a teeny crowd. Really? Yeah. Is that what you would have had
and a bunch
pulled
of people,
together?
Well, a bunch of people left, the news reporters were saying.
Yes, and the room was small. I mean, I watched all night. I geek out on this stuff. Yeah. They were panning the room all the time.
So they were worried that they wanted to have a full room, so they had a small.
Come on, they were never. They never thought they were going to win. They never believed it. That's why they booked that venue. There's not a chance.
You're probably right.
And if I'm not right, and they did think they were going to win, let's say, per chance, that sensibility that what we want is a guy standing on the stage with nobody around him. Have they not watched Barack Obama acceptance speech from 4 years ago? Have they not watched George Bush from 8 years ago? Like, you surround yourself in the stagecraft that introduces a new president to the world. And that's what they were going to do, was that stage with just like jumbotrons in the background. All right. So 15 minutes of gloating. And my 15 minutes of gloat fame will be over. So I'm pleased. I'm pleased.
We can count on no more?
Well, I don't want to gloat anymore. And I think I'm done with it.
But even though it's true, not that much changed in some ways, we did have a lot of women elected.
Well, now that's where things get interesting, isn't it?
At
senators,
least
state
17,
representatives.
One was really close when I went to bed. I didn't hear this morning on that particular race, but might have been. So the fact that there are more kinds of voices being involved in the powers that be in our country makes me very happy, because that's better for all of us. I think it invites a more mixed conversation, or more heterogeneous kind of perspective on issues, and I think that's always better. Always. And
there's been good things that have happened in this election in that sense. Like, this has been a very positive election, if those are the issues that are important to you, right? Now, I do think Republicans and conservative types have a pretty strong bench of women, and I don't know that all of the people who view the world through the lens that I do would be all for women as women if they were also Michelle Bachmann types.
Oh, I know. That race was close. So
close. I think
close,
I woke up late because I was up till all hours. 2 nights in a row, which I'll talk about in a second. Is there a recount now that's being called for in the Michelle Bachmann,
like
Jim Graves?
It doesn't sound like it will be quite that close, but it's within 1%. And part of that is because of the redistricting that was done to make it stronger for her, a stronger constituency. So the fact that she still was that close, her closest.
You mean she
election,
almost lost even when she jerry-rigged the...
Exactly. Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, that's
what I was saying this morning, because I am not a big fan. I am not a fan at all. But I still respect and appreciate the fact that
even the heterogeneous female voice is
we are better when we have more voices. We are better. I do think it can get dangerous for individuals, and I can be guilty of this, to get so fixated on one thing.
You mean like just gender?
Like just gender, or just, you name it. Just
having something against super rich guys. Like that.
Yeah.
That could skew someone's perspective and make them crazy, you mean?
I think and the reason I think it's harmful is because I think it's harmful to our very own souls. Like, I think that if you fight for one cause, I think it can do damage to you. And you can become so myopic in your vision and so jaded and so in a warrior state that it's hard to then do anything else. And I think this is like part of what some of our great leaders who have fought for justice, like Martin Luther King, worried about. He worried about what that kind of aggression could do to people. So I fight against that in myself, but it's hard sometimes.
It is
I
hard.
do have certain things that I care very much about more than other things. So that's why I have to try to say.
Well, and that's where, and so beyond the presidential election, right, which is odd. I think everyone can agree on that, right? Like the amount of energy that goes into it, the amount of power that we give to that role, the amount of power that role has, it's
who can even get to that role?
Yeah, right. It's confusing. Now, I will make a little point to my conservative friends who don't like the direction the country is going.
Yeah.
Okay. These people, which I think I think we should hear from those people more often, and they should make a better argument than has been made in the last 2.5 years. So I really want to engage with people with conservative sensibilities in a way that we're hearing something more than what we've heard in the last 2.5 years, which is kind of obstructionist sort of business. 12 years ago, people like Karl Rove, who's still on television.
Yeah. Last night.
And getting larger by the day, has was famous for having said 12 years ago, we are on the verge of a 50-year Republican majority, right? Like what has happened in this election around the country, the fact that Al Gore didn't win the recount in Florida, whatever. This president, we are now going to set an agenda for a permanent Republican majority for half a century. Lasted 8 years, right? This idea that people have of like, boy, the demographics are destiny. The Republicans are out forever. It's going to be, progressive Democrats all day long. It's not. Our elections are so because we have a representative form of government, which lots of people in the world don't understand. We're not a parliamentary system.
We're not a pure democracy.
There are no like the parliamentary system. There are no real mandates. There's not even notions of mandates. What we do is we elect individuals to represent us, and people shift their allegiances based on how the ideas are articulated by people. It is extraordinarily relational, our politics in this country. And I know people like to bemoan that when their guy loses, that, everybody just wants a guy they want to drink beer with. No, we do in this country say, this is a government of the people, for the people, by the people. So the government is people. So I'm electing a person. And I know that we want to organize around parties, and I'm fine with all that. But truthfully, people sway when it comes to that person. And if they have if the Republicans can put forth someone whose ideas are conservative and whose sensibility and leadership and personhood is the type that people can rally around, they will win presidential elections. They will win senatorial elections. They will win House seats. But they put forth crazy people who say crazy things in crazy ways. They're not going to win. Now, this is where all the hardcore, if you're listening to talk radio this week, conservative talk radio, they are going to pound all day long on this is why you can't run moderates. I know it. They've been setting it up for months. We lost with John McCain, they'll say. We lost with Mitt Romney, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's the case at all. I think
it's more
they can, yes, they need to have, you can't run people at the senatorial level and at the national level for whom people are like, I don't know. And for some reason, we can't seem to get in this country two presidential candidates, both of whom people say, I really like both those guys. Isn't that amazing? Like, what is the yin and yang going on where you can't get that? I mean, poor John McCain, who's a terrific fella. But honestly, I can't imagine a person less fitting for the landscape than John McCain versus Barack Obama, seriously, right? Or even Mitt Romney, or John Kerry against George Bush. Like, you put really charismatic people with a particular way of thinking about the world against one another, and this would be a whole different deal.
Yeah.
So
really interesting.
So anyway, I just think the idea that we think that it's our ideas that have won is part of it, because it's obviously politics are about ideas. I'm not trying to say they're not, but they're also about the person who articulates those ideas in a way that you can capture them. So I think we should be really careful, and should always be careful to recognize that this is it's a relational dynamic, and we live in a relational world. And Barack Obama is going to only be able to effective president if he has positive relationships with people, with the public, with senators, with House people. Like, it's not just systems; it's also it's an economy of personal engagement.
I was discouraged because of this and what you're talking about. I was a little discouraged this morning to hear someone from the House saying the fact that we hung on to the House means we have a mandate.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's these relationships. And I think that it probably appears, or what people will sometimes say who have been in the legislature a long time, that things are actually more congenial than they seem.
Right.
On the to the public, that people actually, I mean, they're friends with each other, and they hang out and they eat lunch together and such. So I'm hoping for that. And I was talking to my kids about that this morning. Like, let's hope that people can talk to each other. Let's try to do a better job of talking to people who don't agree with us, and try to understand what they think and how we could maybe work together and do things together as a team. You know, we talk a lot about teams in my house because I'm a 7- and 10-year-old. And so that's what I'm hoping for, wishing for, and we'll see. I mean, it's a tough time for that.
Yes, it is a tough time for that. And it's a tough time for that, not only because of politics, but there's just some people who are that way, right? I mean, there are people for whom, if on Sunday you were to wear a purple shirt in a house of people who are rooting for a football team that wears green and gold shirts, they literally want you to change shirts. Like, so it's not just politics. Politics doesn't just make people like this. There's people that are just like this.
Is that like a
curious,
DNA thing? Is it like an evolutionary
thing? Well,
thing?
It is
like
the funny thing.
It's
the thing about identity, and where does someone find their identity? And people who are listening now to the show or have had to put up with politics, a woman said on the Facebook page for Doug Pagitt Radio, she said, look, I'm so sick of politics. It doesn't matter. I don't want to hear anything more about it. You know, sort of bemoaning the fact that on the show today we were going to, take one more swing at it.
Sorry.
She's obviously the type of person who's finished. Fair enough. I mean, it's like me after the Super Bowl. I honestly don't want to hear anything more about football. I mean, I can barely listen to it. Okay, like I'm just really done with it. But she's not finding her identity in it. And there are people for whom it's identity forming.
Yes.
Football teams they vote for.
Yeah.
The job that they do, just lots of ways that people form identities. We're all complex creatures that form identities in different ways. And for some people, it's politics. And so now you're not just going after an idea about how we should organize the country, and there's just two different visions, and we're going to work these out. You are dealing at the personal, psychological id level, right? Your sense of yourself. And that's what's in jeopardy. And once you're doing that, once you're having that conversation, and you think you're talking about policy or electoral college or which person would better articulate the views and could carry us forward, and somebody's like, well, actually, in the response, actually, this is my identity and I don't want to lose. That is a different thing. And we have to be able to recognize when someone's there. So this morning I was listening on NPR, and this woman called in who was just she was just furious. Furious that Barack Obama was elected. Can't believe it. I mean, she was articulating exactly the view of people that I worry about, worry for, and worry along with. That this is a sad day for them. So she was just. She really, really thought we're on the wrong track. She couldn't stand the idea of the marriage amendment in Minnesota that's going to not put into our Constitution a bias against same-gender marriage. She was just and it reminded me a little bit of this line from A Few Good Men. If you remember this movie, right? It's this great. There's this scene in this courtroom scene, and Colonel Jessup. He's going
Played
to
by Jack Nicholson.
By Jack Nicholson, it's the role of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And there's this famous part where right at the end he's going to be arrested for whatever he did, and he has this little speech. And this woman was going on about this, and it made me reminiscent of this.
You fucking people! You have no idea how to defend a nation. All you did was weaken a country today, Caffey. That's all you did. You put people's lives in danger. Sweet dreams, son.
That's exactly that was it. Yeah. Like, okay, all you people, you've got the world you want. Yeah. Here we go. We're gonna no jobs. Puppies are gonna sit in the street and cry without food. Like a real dire sort of sensibility. You've weakened the country. Real dystopian sensibility, says the English major. Perfect. It is. You know what? And I feel for that is not something that comes from fact, right? So you can't argue that by not putting in the Constitution in the state of Minnesota a bias against same-gender marriage or allowing same-gender marriage has any effect on opposite-gender marriage or parenting. There's nothing anywhere in the world where same-gendered people have been married where children are treated less well. Anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. There's no facts to support that fear. So this woman and lots of people who have these fears, they're not irrational people, right? They can't be. They're not.
They can't all be.
They're not crazy. So there's something motivating that fear that's not information or facts. So they're rational because they have an other fear.
And so your argument would be identity.
I think it's identity.
Yeah. And that's helpful to think about.
So we have to tread gently when someone's identity is what's being jeopardized, right? Because now you're into interpersonal engagement in a way that like we owe one another. And I think Obama tried to bring this up last night. We owe one another this. Now, I think we also have to be able to say to one another, like, what you needed for your identity to stay in place is really harmful to other people. So you don't get to keep that as an identity forming element, right? The people who want to separate races in this country and for whom that was hugely important, or in other countries and in other times, or people who still want to separate class or something because it gives them a sense of identity that we're the
greater good.
Yeah, well, you have an identity built on something that's quite harmful. So let's tread lightly interpersonally, knowing this is going to be hard for you. But you don't get to hold that any longer. And religious people are in a particularly tough spot because in this country, we have allowed for far too long religious people, and I am one, but religious people to take their ideas and blend them in with the public good in such a way that they can't separate what it means for your church to tell you what marriage means, what the church tells you fiscal policy should be, what the church tells you leadership should look like versus
a nation.
The nation. And people have blended those together in such a way. And what's stunning about it is in 230 years of this experiment in the United States, we have always said there's a distinction between the church and the state. And there are people for whom that still strikes them as odd. Like you wouldn't think so, but anybody who is having a problem because their church doctrine and the state laws are not the same is struggling with that question.
Right.
Now, they would say, no, it's just morals. I want us to be a moral nation, and this is all about morality. One could argue such a thing. That's a fair argument if you were going to say, I have some rationale for the morality that isn't rooted in my religious conviction. And on marriage, in this state at least, in the way this conversation went down, there is no other argument. There isn't one.
Seen a good one. And we've always, we've set ourselves up, so from the very beginning, we were set up for this tension between the rights of the individual or identity, as you're framing it, and the common good, the more perfect union. And these two things are sometimes at odds with one another.
But I would go so far as to say I don't know that it's only the individual versus the common good in the identity. I think there's a way that people form their identity around their politics in a collective sense.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I heard Barack Obama do this again last night, sort of and we are the greatest, like he had a great acceptance speech, and I thought it was fabulous. Other than again the reference to the Marines going up those stairs and killing Osama bin Laden.
Right.
I would just like us to hold anytime we take anyone's life
with
a little more solemn,
a little bit, yeah.
Yes. And also
not talk about it in terms of victory.
Of victories and so on, but in terms of okay, and then the big crescendo at the end, which he hit was fantastic. It was a great speech in that sense. It was very. Had he just done that in the first debate, had he just gotten up there and said that stuff, no matter what the question was, we're all in this together. But then it was, and let's show the world that this is the greatest nation on earth. That comparison identity formed by comparison. We are the greatest in comparison to all the other nations. Here we go again. Now, anything that puts in jeopardy someone's sense that this is the greatest nation now starts to put in jeopardy some people's sensibility of themselves. So religious people hear, my religious life is going to be put in jeopardy, so now I'm going to fight as if my very existence is in place. And that's where we find ourselves with certain religious folks. And that's coming to an end. I'll tell you, across the country, the overt, very direct religious agenda infused with our public policy is waning like no time in the history of this country. So I think religious people who have wanted their religion to receive the support of the state in normalizing it for everyone else have a lot to worry about. I think religious people who want to say my religious sensibilities are competing with other people's religious ideas of the world, they don't have anything to worry about. It's the best time for that. So I heard that there was a rabbi, a female rabbi, who was engaging in this marriage conversation in Minnesota. And she said, look, Christian people, I have a religious tradition that's older than yours, right? And even utilizes some of the same texts that you do, but all of them rather than a select few of them from the First Testament. She said, if I wanted to take my religious sensibilities of what it meant to be a religious person when it comes to how people engage and how we collectively engage, would you want me to take Jewish law and to make that part of the state law? There goes your shellfish, right? There goes your mixed cotton. Like there goes your Friday nights. Like, should I take my religious sensibilities that I can see tied into morality and make those part of the state? No, you wouldn't want that. So why do you think that your religious expression should be so closely tied? Why can't we have the generic laws and then all of our religious communities or all of our social communities get to organize within that common law into the expressions that seem to make sense to us, and we can then do whatever we want to recruit other people to be part of this? Why do you want to use the force of law to make your idea common? That's the argument that's been going on for 230 years. And so I have no sensitivity to the religious people whose single religious argument, whose single argument for their view of the world is, well, that's what my religion says.
Now, do you know?
It just makes me nuts.
Yeah. Me too, because it doesn't account for when the tables turn and people don't seem to recognize that they're shooting themselves in the foot in a way, because like you said, things turn around. Now, it was interesting to hear some of the numbers of who voted for whom. Catholics were slightly tipped for Obama, but mostly split. Jewish people were mostly for Obama. But I didn't hear what the evangelical count was, if there was one. I'm guessing that evangelicals mostly went for Romney, but
yeah, I don't know that.
I didn't hear it.
I'm very interested in that block
Another
of
interesting
people
thing
because
that
that has collapsed.
Yeah, and that's why when you say, the times are shifting, I think that's indicative of that. And other religious people outside, because the evangelicals have been so organized and mobilized and have shifted things. I think that's in some ways kind of had the effect that the marriage amendment had, which was the opposite effect that it was intended, which was to try to bring out more conservative votes, and it actually, at least in Minnesota, seems to have galvanized other people against it to come out. It seems like for evangelicals, it may be, I could be obviously very wrong about this, but it might be that more religious people have stood up and said, wait a minute, I'm not in that camp of religious people, and I want to protect my freedoms because I can see myself getting pushed further to the margins. And so I'm curious to see what those numbers, if anybody's collected them. Another factoid that I heard on PBS last night was that people, Catholics who don't go to church were more likely to vote for Obama, but Catholics who do go to church were more likely to vote for Romney about once a week. And the same, or similarly, Jewish people, or no, Protestants, I can't remember what they said about Jewish people, but Protestants who don't go to church or mainline folks were more likely to vote for Obama than those who do. So
yes, I think
curious.
One of the ways we've decided now to organize religious people in our country is not only by denominational brand, which was sort of the common way in the past. Are you Protestant or Catholic?
And then that
first, and then if you're Protestant, what variety of Protestant are you? Are you Methodist or Presbyterian or Lutheran, or what kind of flavor are you? Now we like to organize, because of some polling and some the questions that are being asked, how religiously engaged are you? So now it's not a continuum of what brand do you associate with, because people are multi-brand, right? They're not stuck in one like they were 50 and 100 years ago. People have switched around. I mean, it happens all the time. I do pastor training, right? I'm with pastors all the time, and 50% of the pastors in the room at any pastor meeting, I will ask, are you currently working in the tradition of religion, of Christianity that you grew up in? 50% of them no. And that's just increasing rapidly. So not only are attendees switching their religious orientations, the professionals, like the people that have a staked interest in it, right? So that's no longer an effective conversation, right? Are you Presbyterian? Are you Methodist? Are you evangelical? Now it's the question of how engaged are you? Do you go to church? Are you someone who has religious, has a religious identity or not? Don't even care which one it is necessarily. The more interesting question is the people who say, yes, I have one, and no, I don't. And they're referred to in this as the nuns, as the
N-O-N-E.
Yeah, yeah. Once again, grateful for the English major. The N-O-N-E-S's, the nuns.
Somebody who has to do a lot of spelling with their kid.
Yes. Oh, I wish I could have a little more spelling. So that's a religious. I mean, that's an interesting group, and I think that's who. And I even saw polling last night on, like, are you a religious person or not? Did you vote? Just throw all the religious people into one clump, right? And people didn't used to think that way. It's an interesting shift.
Yeah.
So I went down to the Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Bruce Springsteen rally in Des Moines, Iowa. So I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. In fact, I'm gonna be with him on Sunday.
You are.
Yeah, I like to say it that way when I'm going to a concert. I like to say I'm going to be with Bruce Springsteen tonight.
He's coming here, or are you going somewhere else?
Well, he's in St. Paul. We're going to meet up in St. Paul.
Exciting.
Yeah, he's going to be
have
over
a little coffee.
He's going to be at the Excel.
Pastry together.
Well, he likes to sing music, so I don't want to cramp his style. I'll just let him sing.
This generous friend you are.
Yeah, so we'll sort of hang around.
So you were.
So I went down because for me, I mean, it
In
was
Iowa.
so 4-hour drive. So
Yes.
on Monday, I get in a car and drove 4 hours and then stood on my feet for 5 hours and then drove back for 4 hours.
Because this
That's
is
nuts.
love. Yeah, that
That
is a
is
bit
nuts.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it was underwhelming. I mean, I kind of knew that the music would be, but the whole rally, this was the
Oh, really?
Barack Obama's final rally.
Yeah.
The final rally of the presidential campaign, his final rally as a candidate. He said it, apparently he got a little emotional. I couldn't see it from where I was. But it was short, started really late, supposed to start at 7:30. Springsteen's not on until 9:20. Obama's not on until 10:15.
And it wasn't super warm.
Oh, holy moly, it was a long day. And it was a little underwhelming, the whole thing. And there was a particular moment
Because
that
of
struck
the
me.
lack of energy, or
Yeah, kind of what he was saying and stuff. I mean, he told the story about where the fired up and ready to go came from, that phrase that was used so powerfully in 2008. It came from this woman in North Carolina, which I've heard that story a lot because I follow this stuff like a nerd. But he tells that story again.
like a nerd, as if you're like a nerd.
Yeah, he follows that story, or he tells that story again, and then says, so we thought, because this woman kind of inspired this in a little meeting in South Carolina, like 6 years ago when he was campaigning. We thought, this being our final rally, it'd be really great to have her here. So the crowd just starts to erupt with excitement. Phones are coming out. Says, so we thought it'd be really great to have her here. So we called her and she said no. Like,
That's
what?
horrible. Oh, that's the worst.
She says no because she thought it was more important to stay and knock on doors in North Carolina. I'm like, at 10 o'clock at night, the night before the election, an old woman. So it's just, I mean, my mind as as somebody who does communicate, I'm thinking, what kind of story is, so then he tries to spin it into, so you should go knock on doors too. But I'm like, you don't tell a story where the whole crowd.
Somebody say to
is
him,
arguing.
don't do that,
And
Barack.
then
Let
it
me
struck me, and I'm a big fan of Obama, right? But
Yeah.
then it struck me. This is the problem that he's had messaging right now. He tells a story from 4 years ago, and then it's not really as good as you thought it was going to be. Yeah, felt a little old, and then just really didn't go. Like, it was curious to me.
Yeah.
After all this campaigning, after 4 years of being the president, and the story you have is
That.
the same chant, and the woman's not actually here, even though it sounded like she was going to be. Didn't actually materialize the way it totally seemed like that story was going. It was a very
I think we're all
confused
a
moment.
little.
There was
I
a
think
confused
a lot
moment.
of us fall guilty of this, though. Prey of wanting to recapture energy that
Mm-hmm.
happened at a certain time, and we do it by trying to drag out
Mm-hmm.
something from then. And that's not how you energize people. Why didn't he talk about Hurricane Sandy? Tell some amazing story about somebody going to the polls, or like.
Anything. Anything but
I can think of 16 million
but retelling the
things
story.
rather
So
than that.
so that struck me, right?
Yeah.
And that to me was just a little bit like
Really off. Yeah.
So anyway, it was a little bit underwhelming. But what I was struck by that was strangely encouraging was, as a mid 40s child of America, the music that is available to a middle-aged man at 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. from Des Moines, Iowa to Minneapolis was nearly perfect. Nearly perfect. I thought I was going to have to, I had a car that I couldn't plug an MP3 player, so I had to do radio. And the guy I was driving with, who came along, for fun, and we were going to drive together so you don't fall asleep, was
Right.
doing nothing but snoring up a storm next to me. So I was on my own. He kept falling asleep and waking up and saying,
Come on,
yeah.
buddy. You're supposed to help me out
So
here.
I had to stay awake. The music was fantastic. There were 4 or 5 channels at any point playing like all the songs from my childhood. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, where's that music in the Twin Cities? And it all ends like in Owatonna. Between Des Moines and Owatonna is like a middle-aged white guy's musical dream.
Shangri-La.
It was unbelievable. it was truly something.
Which is hilarious because how many middle-aged white guys are up between 11 and 2?
I have
Again,
apparently it's quite the
how do we
demographic.
sync the the opportunity with the people who need it.
I mean, it was
sakes.
across the board. There was Kiss music, there was Peter Frampton music, there was Aerosmith. I mean, it was just like. And just classic, and I'm scanning, and just another one and another one. So it was really like somehow that anyway. It was quite the moment. But it was super fun, and it felt historic. It felt like so I went down all the way down there because I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan, and then the President's Last Deal, and in Iowa, and it's close, and it was. So I thought, that probably puts me in the category of somebody who's a significant supporter, right?
I would think so.
And so I want to be especially careful.
At least of Bruce Springsteen.
To not be, I don't think I would have been there without. I shouldn't even say that.
I can tell you would not have been there.
No, I wouldn't have gone down there just for the rally. But I think it does put me in with a category of someone who should be extra diligent, to be sensitive about the fact that for some people they feel like, you know what you did today, McAfee? You weakened the world.
Yes. And
Sweet
on
dreams,
Pagitt
son.
Radio, we'd like to hear from more.
I do, and in fact, I'm hearing from people right now on the thing, and they're a little unsure of wanting to jump right on air. With big,
well,
with big
they can
fans.
send their thoughts to us, and then maybe we can talk about them later.
Yeah.
Because
well,
we
I
really
will
do care.
I will tell the listeners, this is religious radio. That's not quite right. And after this, we're not going to talk politics all the time, even though sometimes it may come up, and we're going to talk about it from the religious angle more often than not. But it's not. This isn't going to be strictly a religious show.
And we want very much to encourage all kinds of voices to be a part of the conversation.
And I would very much like to say to the progressives and to the Democrats, especially even in the state of Minnesota, how important it is for them to not ask religious people to give up religious identity to be part of the progressive democratic movement in this country. It's truly on the verge of that. That it's really hard for people to not have to feel like that's an identity that they have to set aside if they're going to be involved.
I think it's gotten better though.
As
somebody who's been a religious person in progressive circles for a long, long time, I have found more tolerance and acceptance amongst my progressive friends than I have amongst my conservative friends, which has been that's just anecdotal and just personal, and it's been a hardship in some of those friendships with people who disagree. I mean, sometimes I feel like I don't fit in anywhere. It's kind of hard, but I do think it has gotten a little bit easier, and I have found people willing to listen and also willing to seek my opinion just because they don't get it from other places.
I think that's particular to your friends, if I could be so blunt, though.
Maybe.
I'll tell you. I think you pick good friends, because I'll tell you in the
state
party. Well, no, in the state party in Minnesota, there is no tolerance for none.
I'm sorry about that.
It is a real problem. There's a real bias, and I get it, because many people there have been hurt by religion, and they fundamentally don't trust it, and I get it. But a little work has to be done there, in the same way that the social conservatives have to free their theory from religious doctrine. There has to be a way for progressives to be more open to religious people without the reactive fear that comes from the allergies that they've had reasons to develop over the decades.
And the thing that helped me understand or try to get some empathy and perspective for conservatives was actually watching the new Battlestar Galactica. Because I found myself upon occasion in that show saying, yeah, steal that election.
Yeah, right.
Not that that's like that I would align that with views other than mine, but I found myself in strange places. Yeah, don't tell everybody that thing. Keep that a secret. Where normally I would be arguing for openness and such. And science fiction has a beautiful way of doing that upon occasion. So maybe all of us should watch and read a little more science fiction. Help us be more tolerant.
I'm sure our conservative listeners are like, "Oh, you people are full on in fiction already. Like your whole view of the world is totally based on fiction." I heard these. I hear from these people quite often that they just think this is all smoke and mirrors. You guys are just living in a la la land, and someday you're going to have to deal with the realities of the world, and your utopian progressive sensibilities are going to send us into dire straits, and then we're going to have to come clean up after you people. So you just watch. We're going to have to come in.
And if we can cut through the rhetoric and the dire talking that all of us do, and really, really listen and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, we will all be better
off.
off.
Babies anywhere. I agree.
Yeah.
Stop the
Another
baby throwing
phrase worse than please just punch.
Like we use, I hear that a lot. Like because I'm accused of being one who throws babies out with bathwater. I'm like I've used a drain my entire life, and babies don't fit down the drain. There's no risk of getting rid of the bathwater and losing the baby. Stop telling people that we're wanting to kill babies. I don't want to kill babies when I want to change a system. I just want to get rid of the dirty water.
I just want to indoctrinate them in my point of view.
Yeah. Oh, that whole metaphor. I'm not picking on you. I'm picking on that metaphor. That whole metaphor of throwing the baby out. Well, no. Of course I don't want to throw. Hey, a programming note. We're cutting the show short today because I have to do a webinar, a training webinar with people in Canada on preaching in the inventive age. So I'll post if you just can't get enough this morning. I will post a link to where you could be involved in this if you want to be part of this webinar, where I do the other part of my work life. And then next week, the show is either going to be broadcast on Tuesday or on Thursday or Friday, because I'm in Washington D.C. and with the new president and all, I don't know his schedule. So in the new after the election here, I just don't know if how he's going to be available. But I'm in Washington D.C. and I've got some details to figure out on the details of the show. So we're cutting short today. It's going to be less than an hour long show today, and then next week I'll look for it at a freshened up time, and I'll put that on the page. For those of you who listen to the recordings on this, because you go to DougPagittRadio.com, you don't have to worry about that. So Victoria, thank you. Happy elections to everyone for whom this is a.
And also with you.
This is that this was a good day, and hang in there if you're someone who feels like this didn't go all the way you want it to. It's going to be okay, for sure. All right, so we'll talk to you again next week, sometime, one way or the other. Doug Pagitt Radio. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank
you. We need like a sign off.
We do.
Yeah. Over and out.